Morning, sir.
Om
Sadaशिवसमारम्भां शङ्कराचार्यमध्यमाम् अस्मदाचार्यपर्यन्तां वन्दे गुरुपरम्पराम्
Om
ॐ सहना भवतु सहनौ
Sahaviriyam
वीर्यं
Karvavai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvijavahai. Om Shanti Shanti. Okay, so we will continue from where we left off. We had completed verse number 34. And so let us look at verse number 35. And we will chant. Shreyan Swadharmo Vigunaha.
Shreyan Swadharmo Vigunaha
Paradharmat Swanashtita.
Paradharmat Swanashtita
Swadharme Nidhanam Shreyaha.
Swadharme Nidhanam Shreyaha
Paradharmo Bhayavaha.
Paradharmo Bhayavaha.
Okay. So Shreyan Swadharma. Shreyan broken up to Shreyan plus Swadharma. Vigunaha. Paradharmat. Ta with a halant. Paradharmat. Swanushthitat. Swadharme Nidhanam Shreyaha. Paradharmaha Bhayavaha. And the Anvaya is Sa Su Anushtitat. Paradharmat Swadharma Vigunaha Api Shreyan. Full stop. Swadharme Nidhanam Shreyaha Bhaya Avaha Paradharmaha. So the Anvaya you can break up. Vigunaha Swadharmaha Swanishtitat Paradharmat Shreyan. So Shreyan Swadharmaha. One's own dharma is Shreyan, is better, even if it is Vigunaha. Even if one's own dharma is performed not with perfection. So Gunaha here is taken as perfection. Viguna without perfection. So Shreyan Vigunaha Swadharmaha. Even if I do my own Swadharma, and it is not perfectly performed, it is Shreyan. It is better than Paradharma Swanushthitat. A very well performed Swanushthitat. Well performed dharma of somebody else. Paradharma. So that is the first part of it. The second part will be Swadharme Nidhanam Shreyaha. Nidhanam, dying in the performance of Swadharma, of one's own dharma, is Shreyaha, is better. Because Paradharmaha Bhayavaha. The dharma of somebody else is always enveloped with fear. Because somebody else's duty is always dangerous. So here, you have to remember that all this has to be connected to what? Prakritim yanti bhutani of the 33rd verse. All beings behave according to their own prakriti only. And Arjuna, what is your prakriti? Your prakriti is rajogunaha. And therefore it is natural that your mind is restless, that there are always thoughts in your mind. And therefore, what sort of life should you have? It should be activity-oriented life. And as far as activities are concerned, activities can be dharmic, activities can be adharmic. And whenever, so what Krishna is saying that if your own nature is rajasic, rajoguna pradhanam, rajasic, then it is only going to be natural that you are going to be inclined towards an active life, right? Lot of activity. But an activity can be both dharmic and adharmic. If you find that your mind is moving towards adharmic activity, you have to be discriminating. You have to ensure that that adharmic activity is not nourished. And whenever there is an interest in dharmic activity, then you can go ahead with that. Therefore, you have to respect your swabhava. You have to respect your nature. But in that respect given to your nature should be within the parameters of dharma also. So your karma should be in keeping with your prakriti, your nature, but your karma should also be in keeping with dharma. So these are the rules for everyday life. What does prakriti manifest as my desires? What does dharma manifest as the rules governing my life? And therefore, my life's journey has to be within these two boundaries. Wherever there is raga dvesha and the raga dvesha is not adharmic, then I can go ahead with it. There is no problem. But if the raga dvesha is adharmic, if it doesn't align with dharma, if it is not within the boundaries of dharma, then I have to remember that I am going against the natural laws. And when I fight with the laws of nature, there is only one loser, and that is me. Right? It is like rubbing your bare back against the trunk of a tree. Nothing happens to the tree, but your back is split open. And what is Swadharma? Swadharma is Swadharma, Swayam Dharma, my own dharma. And dharma here can be taken as karma because these karmas are defined how? According to my environment. See, in the old days, everybody had clearly defined roles according to the varnashrama, right? You are a particular category of ashrama, grihastha, brahmachari, vanaprastha, sannyasi. Each of these ashramas had their own particular rules. And therefore it was defined. Or varnas were there. You are a brahmachari, or you are a kshatriya, you are a brahmana, you are a vaishya or a shudra. Both varnas as well as ashramas, they had their own set of rules, and therefore the Swadharma was very clear in those days. But nowadays, varnashrama has no relevance, and therefore one has to use one's broad intelligence as governed by the Shastra in deciding what is my dharma. So in any given situation, remember that in any given situation, the situation itself will tell you what the response should be. The response required is always very clearly visible, and that response is your duty, provided there is one very great provision. When I am faced with a situation, I am saying that the situation itself will indicate to me what is the correct response. The very events of that situation, the very parameters of that situation, it will make it known to me what is the correct response. And that correct response is always what I call dharma, my duty, right? Provided there is one caveat. What is that caveat?
It is aligned with dharma.
Oh, that's fine. We are trying to describe what is my dharma, right? So when I am looking at something, what is that one condition which is important for me for that situation to reveal to me the correct response?
Your inborn tendencies or your gunas? What is your
free will,
your intention,
your free will.
What you don't want to do.
That it causes the least
Knowledge.
possible harm.
Jnana.
What you don't want it to happen to yourself, you don't do.
Or
Based on
Acharya,
your
it's
guna.
Aham Brahmasmi.
To accept it as Ishvara Prasad?
No.
Jnana of your guna.
Let me put it another way. Whenever you examine something, you have to examine it objectively, without subjectivity. So from that, without subjectivity means what in Vedantic terms?
Understand that you're not the doer of that action.
eliminate?
No, it means without raga dvesha. Your own ragadvesha is what always complicates the situation. And therefore, you should have got this by now, because, Krishna did say, Tayorna Vashama Gachet. You should not come under the influence of those two. If you to understand any word in the Gita, it is always important to remember what we have studied. So he did say, Ragadvesho Vivasthitau, Tayorna Vashama Gachet. Do not come under the influence of those ragadvesha. And therefore, if the situation you are looking at is to provide you with the correct answer, you have to drop the ragadvesha. You have to look at the situation without ragadvesha, which is what is meant by looking objectively. Subjectivity is ragadvesha. It has to be dropped. Right? That is a dharma. And therefore, paradharma, which is what someone else is doing. Right? That is what he says. Paradharma bhayavaha. Don't look at how somebody else reacts to a situation. You don't know his circumstances. It is useless to do that. You have to do what you have to do. Right? In a game of cricket, the wicket keeper should perform his own role. Then only there is beauty in that game. Then only the game is played well. If he performs the duty of the square-leg fielder, what will happen to the duty of the wicket-keeper? Right? And therefore, Swadharme nidhanam shreyaha. Even death in your own Swadharma is welcome. It is okay, because paradharmo bhayavaha. The duty of somebody else is dangerous. Because if you are performing somebody else's duty, you are not performing yours. And furthermore, that duty of somebody else is known only to him because of his own situation. And that is why when one person violates Swadharma, you will find that if that person is a role model, you will find that everybody violates Swadharma. Everybody violates. And there will be utter confusion in society, and therefore it should be avoided. And Arjuna, what is your Swadharma? Your Swadharma as a Kshatriya is what? Fighting a Dharma Yuddha. Right? How should I look at my Swadharma? How do I decide what is my Swadharma? There is only one way. What is that? I have to look at my Swabhava, at my own guna mix. Am I Sattva predominant? Am I Rajas predominant? And if I am Rajas predominant, what is the next predominance? Is it Sattva or is it Tamas? Or am I Tamas predominant? So normally we take 3 or 4 different combinations of Sattva, Rajas, Tamas, SRT. So SRT is 1, RST is 2, RTS is 3, TRS is 4. These are the combinations. SRT, Sattva predominant, which is what Varna?
Brahmana.
Brahmana. Now, Rajas predominant can have 2, backed up by Sattva or backed up by Tamas. So, Rajas backed up by Sattva is Kshatriya. Rajas backed up by Tamas is what?
Shudra.
Shudra.
Is Vaishya.
Vaishya.
And Tamas predominant is Shudra. So, this is the classification. So, I have to look what is the Varna that I am. And in accordance with that particular guna mix, in accordance with that Varna, now you can see the importance of the Varna classification in the old days. It is not some random classification. It is a classification according to my attitudes, my tendencies, my very guna mix. And it is that which decides what I should do. Okay. So with this, the Karma Yoga topic is over. That is why you will find the next. Krishna has concluded his exposition of Karma Yoga. And now Arjuna asks a question. So we will chant. Please unmute yourself and we will chant. Arjuna uvacha.
Arjuna
Vacha.
Athakena payuktoyam.
Athakena prayuktoyam.
Apam charati purushaha.
Apam charati purushaha.
Anichannapi varshneya. Baladiva niyojitaha. Okay. So, Arjuna uvacha atha kena prayuktaha ayam papam charati purushaha anichan api varshneya balat eva niyojitaha. The Anvaya is Arjuna uvacha e varshneya kama atha kena prayuktaha ayam purushaha anichan api papam charati kama balat eva niyojitaha. Arjuna uvacha. Arjuna said. Anvaya. Arjuna said. What? Atha kena prayuktaha. Forced by what? Impelled by what? Atha kena. By what? Prayuktaha. Forced. Impelled. Ayam purushaha. This person. Any person. Papam charati. Commits papam. Niyojita eva. As if pushed. Niyojita means pushed or forced. It is the same as prayuktaha. Niyojitaha eva. As if, and the eva is very important here. He is saying that even Arjuna subconsciously understands that there is no real push. He has not really believed, but he is a superficial understanding. Therefore, he says, Niyojita eva. As if pushed. Balat. By some powerful force. Even though anichan hevashnaya. So hevashnaya, anichan, even though he does not desire. So the anichan, to the phrase anichan, you have to connect the rest of it. Anichan, not desiring to commit sin. Anichan papam, not desiring to commit sin. Even then, api, by what force? Atakena prayuktaha, by what force is he pushed to commit sin? Hey Vashnaya. Okay. This is the question which Arjuna says. The scriptures clearly present to us that there are two streams of life. One is favorable and one is not favorable. So Karma Yoga is healthy and leads to Chitta Shuddhi, which can lead to Jnanam, which can lead to Moksha. That is one stream. And there is a reverse stream. The violation of Karma Yoga will lead to rebirth again, because you don't get Jnanam, and therefore there is said to be spiritual destruction. And Bhagavan has given us Viveka Buddhi. You know, how do you know? Even a thief knows that stealing is wrong. How does he know?
No, hides and doesn't. He doesn't do it in the open.
He doesn't do it in the open.
Secretly.
Right? And you can ask him whether he will like somebody to steal from him, and he will say no. And therefore he knows the stealing is wrong. So everybody knows dharma. That is what Arjuna here means, you know. Anichannapi. Anichannapi, this is the explanation for Anichannapi. He knows that adharmic activity is wrong. And Duryodhan in Mahabharata says very beautifully, I think I must have one of my favorite lines, and one you should remember, because this expresses the fundamental problem of a human being. He says, Janami dharma na chame pravrittihi. A very beautiful line. He says, oh, I know what dharma is. Janami dharma. I definitely know what dharma is. What is the problem? Name pravrittihi. I can never, do dharma. I can never adhere to dharma. And then he says, Janami adharma. I know what adharma also is. And there is a problem. What is that? Name nivrittihi. I cannot restrain myself from doing adharma. So at least clarity is there. He knows what is dharma. He knows what is adharma, but he is not capable of doing dharmic activity. He is not capable of restraining himself from adharmic activity. This he says very clearly here. Then he adds another line. He says, Kenapi devena hridisthitena. There is some deva, there is some God. Kena api deva. There is some God Hridisthitena, who is sitting in my heart. And yatha niyukto asmi, as he tells me, as he directs me. Yatha niyukto asmi, as I am directed by him. Tatha karomi, I do in that manner. So really speaking, it is not my fault. It is all the fault of that fellow who is sitting in my heart. Okay. What is the implication here? That I am a good guy. I am not responsible for the evil things that I do. It is all because of that chap sitting in my heart. So Duryodhana thinks that he is controlled by some external force. And Arjuna also seems to be thinking the same. And that is why he says, Anichanapi, even though a person wants to be a dharmic person only, papam charati, he commits dharma, right? And therefore there is some devil in your heart. Some Satan is there, some shaitan is there. Who does what? Balad niyojiti eva. He forces us to all kinds of adharmic actions. Not out of ignorance of the fact that the action is adharmic. If you don't know that something is adharmic and you do it, there is still an excuse. But he says not out of ignorance. Janami adharma. But in spite of the knowledge that the action is adharmic, balad niyojita eva, I am forced by that person who is sitting in my heart. Arjuna says, kena prayoktaha. Persuaded by which principle does the person commit adharma? He Vashnaya. Oh Vashnaya. So Vashnaya has two definitions. So I will give you one. Samyag bodhaha tena avagamyati iti Vashnaya. Samyag bodha tena avagamyati. The one who is known by samyak bodhaha. Samyak is, bodha is knowledge. Samyak is complete, full, clear. Avagamyati is to be known. The one who is known by clear knowledge. Samyak bodhaha, which is what? Clear knowledge given by the Shastram. Such an entity is called Vashnaya. That's the meaning of Vashnaya. Okay. Now, interestingly enough, when Arjuna asks this question, Shankara comments here saying, Arjuna is asking a question on a topic which has already been discussed and commented by Krishna and explained by Krishna at great length. Where?
Chapter 2.
Verse number. You should be able to jump between chapters. Then only you understand the Gita. So in verse 62, he says, Dhyayato Vishayam Pumsaha. He has already told us how a person ends up in committing something against his will, right? And again, not so far away, he said, Raga Dvesho Asya Paripanthinao. Very close. These two are your enemies. 34th verse of this particular chapter, right? These two are your enemies. The problem is that when we study, we are just going with the flow of the verses. But Shankara's vision is very minute. And therefore he points out that this is a repetition of a question, which was answered not once, but twice. Once in the third chapter, once in second chapter. And therefore Arjuna is to be taken as not having understood clearly. But Krishna is a very patient teacher. He doesn't want to tell Arjuna that you are a dumb fellow. I mean, no good teacher will try to, disrespect his student. So Krishna says, okay, he understands that it is a very important topic. And therefore, again, he emphasizes that. And that is in the next sloka, which we shall read. The same answer is given basically, but in different words. It's the next sloka. So we'll read. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha.
Shri Bhagavan
Kama esha krodha esha. Rajoguna samudbhavaha. Mahashano mahapapma. विध्येनम इह वैरिणम Okay, now we will do the same way every time. So Sri Bhagavan Uvacha Kamaha Eshaha Krodhaha Eshaha Rajoguna Samudbhavaha Mahashanaha Mahapapma Vidhi Enam Iha. So the Vidhyenam Iha is Vidhi Enam Iha Vairinam. Anvaya is Sri Bhagavan Uvacha Esha Kamaha, comma, Esha Krodhaha Rajo Guna Samudbhavaha Rajo Guna Samudbhavaha Maha Ashanaha, the small n, the first n, not the other n. Maha Ashanaha Maha Papma, full stop, Iha Vidhi Enam Vairinam, or Vidhi Iha Enam Vairinam. So Sri Bhagavan Uvacha, Sri Bhagavan said, what did he say? Esha Kamaha, this desire, Esha Krodhaha, this anger, Rajogunaha Samudbhavaha, is born out of Rajogunaha only. So this desire, this anger is born out of Rajoguna only. Maha Ashanaha is a great eater. It eats a lot. Ashanam is to eat. Maha Ashanam is great eater. And Maha Papma is a great sinner. And therefore, Vidhi, you should know, Iha, in this world, Enam Vairinam. Vidhi Enam Iha Vairinam. In this world, these two enemies, this is your enemy. Okay, this is your enemy. Singular number. So there's an explanation for that. Even though we are talking about two things, he uses the word this. This is your enemy. Now here, Shankara suddenly remembers that in all this commentary up to this stage, he has not explained the word Bhagavan. Okay, if I remember correctly, somewhere last year, when we talked about Bhagavan, it's almost a year ago, I think, more than a year ago, one of you asked me, what does Bhagavan mean? Okay, what is the meaning of Bhagavan? That we have not commented upon so far, and at that point of time, I did say that we will talk about it later. And I don't remember if we have discussed it earlier, but here in his commentary on this verse, Shankara very specifically comments. And he quotes from Vishnu Puranam. Vishnu Puranam, he quotes, he says, Aishwarasya samagrasya dharmasya yashasaha shriyaha vairagyasya atha mokshasya shananam bhaga iti ranaha. Okay. Now one tidbit is that normally all the Puranas are attributed to Vyasacharya, but Vishnu Purana is attributed to a rishi called Parashara Muni. Okay, so that little tidbit is there. If you want to keep it in your mind, to keep it, otherwise you can forget it. It's not relevant. So he says, Shananam Bhaga iti ranaha. So iti ranaha means iti iranaha. These names. Shananam. 6 names there are. 6 bhagas. Bhagas there is virtues. Remember, it is not bhagaha. Bhagaha means part in Hindi. It is not bhagaha. It is bhaga. Bhaga means a virtue. So Shananam Bhaga Itiranaham. The person who has these 6 virtues, that is called Vishnu. Okay, or the Bhagavan. Here in this case, Vishnu is Bhagavan. That is the name of Bhagavan. What are they? Aishwaryam, the first one. Aishwaryam is controllership. Primary meaning, this is the primary meaning, right? But normally in Hindi or even other languages, when we say Aishwaryam, what does it mean?
Wealth.
Wealth.
The secondary meaning is wealth. But remember, the primary meaning is overlordship, controllership, power. So we are not to take the secondary meaning of wealth over here. And Shankara makes it very clear. He says Aishwarya means controllership, power. So the one who has got power. Okay. And to every one of these bhagas, virtues, you have to connect the second word, samagrasya. Samagrasya means in total measure, in full quantity. Okay, so total ownership, total controllership, Aishwaryasya. Then second one is dharma. So dharmasya. So dharma here is taken as punyam. So the one who has total punyam. Okay, just a word here. In some texts, it reads as Aishwarasya Virasya instead of Dharmasya. Okay, so some texts use the word Viraha instead of Dharmaha. Viraha means courage, valor. So that is also okay, the one who has courage in full measure. Then Yashaha, fame. Shriyaha, wealth. All forms of material wealth he has. Why does he have? Because in the Lord, everything is there. Everything is what we call resident in the Lord only. And then whatever is there belongs to him. So Shriyaha, all forms of wealth are there. Immediately after Shriyaha, Vairagyam is added to indicate that even though wealth is there with him, he is asangaha. He has no ownership. And wealth without ownership is a blessing. With ownership, it can become a curse. And the last one is moksha. And the most important word here is samagrasya, in full measure. One must not forget, in full measure. Because in limited measure, if you have any of these qualities or all of these qualities, then you are a jiva only. Because all of us have some measure of these qualities. And that is why we are jivas. But if you have it in unlimited measure, samagrasya, infinite quantities, then only you are Bhagavan. And more importantly, Shankara writes here, these are all nityam. All the quality, what does he mean by nityam? If I have any of these qualities or even all of these qualities, the jiva's qualities are acquired because of punya karma only, of previous births and this birth. Right? But the word nityam here, which is indicated by Shankara, indicates that these qualities are intrinsic to Bhagavan. They are not acquired because of punya karma. And because of not being acquired, they are infinite. They will never be exhausted. They cannot be separated from Bhagavan. Okay, so this is as far as Bhagavan is concerned. Shankara's commentary on Bhagavan. And in this verse, Krishna is pointing out that there is no external force controlling you. There is nobody sitting in your heart, like Duryodhana has said. Everything is within yourself only. There is no external force at all. So Vedanta does not have any external devils. External shaitan is not there. If at all there is a shaitan, it is you only. That basic force, there is a basic force without doubt, which is controlling you. But the point is, it is not an external force. It is your own basic force, which is what? Ajnana, ignorance. And that basic ignorance which I have, that is the cause of all my problems. And as we know by now, ignorance works at two levels. One is dharma adharma, that is ignorance with regard to what is dharmic and what is adharmic. And one is ignorance with regard to atma anatma. So there is no other force other than this kind of ajnanam which is working here. If you look at the verse, you will not see ajnanam mentioned, right? Krishna does not talk about the ajnanam directly because ajnanam is apratyaksha. It is not manifest. It is avyaktam. And since it is not manifest, we rarely feel the presence of the ajnanam, but we know the products of that ajnanam. And that basic ajnanam expresses as two products, as two very strong forces kamaha and krodaha, desire and anger. And this desire, anger, this kamaha, krodaha alone is the problem. So from this verse, Krishna is commencing a discussion on kama, krodaha. So there are three aspects. The kama, krodha, swarupam, the nature of desire and anger. The karanam, the cause of desire and anger. And the parihara, the solution to desire and anger. These three are going to be talked about in the next few verses. And so kama esha, krodha esha. Kama is desire, krodha is anger. What is the difference between kama and raga?
Attachment. Raga is attachment.
So I want the difference. Kama is towards some object which you don't have. You cannot desire what you have. So that is kama, right? And raga, attachment, is towards an object which you have. You can't have attachment to something which you don't have. I hope that's clear. There's a very clear distinction between kama and raga. Kama is aprapta vastu, that which you don't have. Raga is prapta vastu, that which you have. What is desire? That, what is desire need not be explained at all. And that is why Krishna uses the term eshaha. Eshaha means this desire, this krodaha, this anger, which all of you know because you experience it very intimately. Which one of us has not experienced desire and anger? All of us have, right? And therefore he says, eshaha kama, eshaha krodaha. This desire which all of you know very intimately, one need not explain what that desire is. One need not explain what that anger is. And how they are born? Rajoguna samudbhavaha. They are born out of Rajoguna only. And there is an adjective, maha ashanaha. So that is the description of maha ashanaha is mahat ashanam bhojanam yasya saha. The one who eats lots. One whose bhojanam is in mahat quantity, in huge quantity. That is called a maha ashanaha. And here practically it means what? Any amount of desires you fulfill, it will never end. It will never exhaust your desires. In fact, the very act of fulfilling the desire will ensure that further desires will be stronger than ever. Okay. Swami Chinmayananda once gave an arithmetical equation for happiness. He said happiness is equal to the number of desires that you fulfill divided by the number of desires that you have. And the highest measure of happiness is equal to what? 1. So if the number of desires that you fulfill is 100, and the number of desires that you have is 100, then you have full measure of happiness. Why? Because you have no other desires left to fulfill. What is the problem? This denominator, the number of desires that I have, it increases very rapidly, exponentially. So by the time I fulfill 10 desires, the desire is increased from 10 to 100. If I have 10 desires and I have fulfilled 5, then how happy am I? 50%. But as I keep on fulfilling desires, I will find that there is a limitation in the increase in the numerator because I have limited time, I have a limited energy, and therefore the number of desires that I can fulfill is limited. While the number of desires which I can have, they keep on increasing. So after some years, I will find that I have fulfilled 1,000 desires, but my number of desires are now 5,000 or 20,000. So I am 10% happy or 5% happy. In spite of having fulfilled, 995 desires, there are still so many left. And therefore, I'm still only 10% happy. And the older your body grows, so the longer you live, the faster the denominator grows. And therefore, it can never be completed. Therefore, kama is called mahashanaha, one which eats more and more and more and is never satisfied. What is the problem with fulfilling desires? I am so preoccupied with fulfilling them because, as I said, fulfillment of desire takes time, it takes energy. And therefore, if I am running behind fulfilling desires, which is the lot of most people today, I will find that I have no time to go for prayer. I have no time to go to temples. I have no time to attend Gita class. I have no time for anything but to fulfill the desires. And therefore, the mind is constantly absorbed in these worldly desires. It has no time to ask, what is the basic fundamental problem in my life? And therefore, you keep on moving from problem to problem. What is required? A religious life combined with study of Shastram is required. Before I can understand that this materialistic life has to be analyzed, has to be inquired into. So I know that there is some fundamental problem. I know in which direction I am going. Is that direction right or wrong? And Krishna says that is why desire is your enemy, because it doesn't allow you to ask the fundamental question. That is why it is papma. It is the greatest sinner because it is leading you towards a lot of sorrow in future. And therefore, desire I should know to handle. And then anger is also a problem. What is the problem with anger? It makes a person violent. And violence is a papam. So anger makes me do papam. Papam makes me come down on the spiritual ladder. You can remember the verse from chapter 2. And therefore, this anger is a problem. And kama makes a person extroverted. An extroverted person can never follow dharma. Therefore, kama and krodha, these are my two biggest enemies. So, angry person does not care how he behaves, right? What is the standard of behavior that I should have? It is mentioned in a verse from the Mahabharata. It's a very beautiful verse. Shruyatam dharma sarvasvam shrutvacha avadharyatam atmanah pratikulani paresham na samachare. So this is being told to, I think, to Yudhishthira. Shruyatam dharma sarvasvam. Hear everything about dharma. Shruyatam dharma sarvasvam. Please hear everything about dharma. And that is not enough. Shrutva, having heard, avadharyatam, please understand. And what is the essence of all dharma? Atmanaha pratikulani. Pratikulam is opposite of anukulam. Anukulam is what is comfortable to me. Pratikulam is what is disagreeable to me. Atmanaha here is reflective pronoun. It is not Satchit Atmanam. Atmana means me. Atmanaha pratikulani. What is disagreeable to me, what is uncomfortable for me, paresham na samachare. I should never inflict on anybody else. Very beautiful line. Hear about dharma completely, having heard, assimilate it fully. What is that you have to assimilate and hear? Do not inflict on others that which is not comfortable for you. And therefore, enam vairinam. May you understand that these two are your enemies. And this kama and krodha is continuously emphasized throughout the Gita. Why? These are the biggest problems in life come because of kama and krodha only. And therefore, handling kama krodha should be the lifelong project for any intelligent human being. Why? Because the quality of my life is determined by what? By these two powerful forces only. And Krishna is talking about these two enemies, desire and anger, kama and krodha. But these two are not separate enemies. They are one and the same enemy. We saw in second chapter, anger is nothing but obstructed desire. So desire expressed or obstructed desire expressed is anger. The root is desire only. Therefore, there is really only one enemy, and that is desire. So, we can think of an example, right? There is a story in Mahabharata about Urvashi who was infatuated with Arjuna. And she asked him to marry her. And Arjuna tells Urvashi he cannot marry her. So that desire of Urvashi's to marry Arjuna gets frustrated. When Arjuna says, I cannot marry you, what does she do? What does she do? Very famous
She
story.
curses him.
Curses him to be what?
Bruhanala.
To be a eunuch, right? She curses him to be a eunuch. And that is frustrated desire turning into anger. It's nothing but desire alone, but frustrated form, right? And we should know this by carefully reading this particular chapter, because we will notice that Krishna has introduced two things, Kama and Krodha only, but throughout the chapter, he deals only with Kama. He does not touch Krodha at all, indicating that when I have dealt with Kama, Krodha has been dealt with. Deal with your desire, deal with your expectations. You don't need to separately deal with anger. It will have been dealt with. Of course, one careful note over here, Kamaha here is unrefined Kama. There are two forms of desire are there. Binding desires, which we call unrefined desires, and non-binding desires, which we call refined desires. Non-binding desires, refined desires are in accordance with Shastram. And it is encouraged even because you need that desire even to study the Shastram. You cannot do Karma Yoga without desire. You cannot do Upasana Yoga without desire. And therefore the next few verses, they deal not with binding desire, not with binding Kamaha, but with, not with non-binding Kamaha, but with binding Kama. They deal with unrefined Kama, unrefined desire. How that unrefined desire can become your enemy, this is explained in the next month, next sloka, which we will read. We will not be able to complete it today, but we can start it today. So please unmute yourself. This is the 38th mantra. Dhumena vahannihi.
Dhumena
Yatha darsho malena cha. Yathol bena vrato garbha. Tatha tenedam avritam. So here's just one observation. Very many people said vahannihi, pronouncing ha in full. That is wrong. It's a very odd way of writing. The na, which is in between the ha, is actually a full na. Okay, the ha is half. So vahannihi. The na is to pronounce vahannihi, not vahanni. Vahannihi. Just a side observation. Okay, but necessary for people who are doing the chanting. So look at the words. Dhumena. I will just mute you so that we don't hear people yawning. Dhumena avriyate vahannihi yatha adarshaha malena cha yatha ulbena avrataha garbha tatha tena idam avritam. Now look at the Anvaya. Yatha vahannihi avriyate. Just as the fire, yatha vahanni, just as the fire, avriyate is covered, dhumena, by smoke clouds, by smoke. That is the first example. There are three examples in this particular verse. The first one is Yatha Vannihi Avriyate Dhumena. Just as the fire is covered by the smoke, number one. Number two, Yatha Adarshaha Avriyate Malena. Adarshaha is mirror. Malena is dust. Yatha Adarshaha Malena Avriyate. Number two, just as a mirror is covered by the dust. And Yatha Garbhaha Avrataha Ulbena. Ulbena is the womb. Garbhaha is fetus. Yatha Garbhaha Avrataha Ulbena. Just as the fetus is covered by the womb. Three examples. Tatha, in that same way, idam. This what? This jnanam. Tatha idam, this jnanam. Avratam is covered. Tena, by that. Literally the meaning is, in the same manner, this is covered by that. Tatha idam avratam tena. This is covered by that. You have to extract the meaning. In that same manner, idam jnanam, this knowledge, avratam, is covered by tena, that desire, that kamaha. Okay, this is in simple English. This knowledge is covered by desire in the same way that fire is covered by smoke, mirror is covered by dust, and fetus is covered by the womb. Three examples are given to indicate that jnanam is covered by kamaha. So we said earlier that if you learn to handle kamaha, you need not separately handle krodhaha. And therefore you will notice that in this, Krishna is not discussing the problem of anger. He discusses only desire. And the first example is Yata Vannihi Dhumena Avriyate. Just as the fire is covered by smoke. And Shankara here adds a very interesting adjective. He says Sahajaha. What does Sahajaha mean?
Easily. Natural.
It is not easily, okay? Easily is something which we extract. Sahaja means natural. Okay. So natural. And this we have to try to understand. We're trying to understand why has Shankara said natural. He's pointing out that there are two types of desires. One is natural desire and one is acquired desire. Everybody has two types of desires. Natural, or you can call it instinctive desires. Examples are desires for food, sexual desires. These are all instinctive desires. They are natural to you, which means that you have no choice about their presence in the mind. Okay, and to understand this, you have to recall the discussion we had about the conversion of vasana into vritti, into action. So these natural desires are the vasana manifesting as vritti. And in our discussion, we had said that in the conversion of vasana to vritti, there is no scope for operation of your free will. Okay, and therefore, the desire for food and the desire for sex, for this, the presence of these desires in your mind, the presence of these vrittis in your mind, you have no operation of free will there. You cannot choose not to have a desire for food or a desire for sex. It is a natural desire coming out of your vasana. But therefore, your free will cannot operate as far as the existence of the desires are concerned, but your free will can operate as to the nourishment of these desires. This is what we had discussed in the, I think it was this 34th verse, the discussion which we did in the last class. It's always important to remember that you should never be ashamed about the presence of desires in your mind. You can only, attempt to ensure that you don't nourish them. And these are natural desires. Okay, so for natural desires which occur, since I have no willpower in operation, I have nothing to worry about. If they are there, they are there. I only need to handle them. That is for natural desires. And then there is acquired desires. What is an example of an acquired desire?
Wanting to eat more and more food or different kinds of foods. If it is the food.
Acquired desire. Food is basically natural. And if you are saying different kinds of food, that is also, it can't be really acquired.
Acquired that you seek
to have more wealth and all.
Material.
To have more wealth.
Materialistic desire.
Your desire, in any materialistic desire, like, I want the latest iPhone, or I want the latest S-Class Mercedes Benz. All these are all acquired desires. And therefore, when Shankara uses the term sahaja, he is ruling out the acquired desires. He is talking about only instinctive desires. And that is why he says dhumaha. What is the comparison? Dhumaha, the smoke, is natural where there is fire. Okay. Remember, we are talking about the olden days where you had wood being used. You can't say that today I'm using gas and there is no smoke in the gas. And even here, fire has two functions. What are they?
Light and heat.
Light and heat, burning and heating. And this smoke affects which of these functions?
Light.
Light.
The light, not the heating. Remember, a fire covered by smoke is just as hot as the fire not covered by smoke. And therefore, Shankara here adds the word. Shankara, you must appreciate that acuteness of his vision. He adds aprakasha atmakam. That fire does not illuminate properly when surrounded by smoke. He doesn't say, but we have to understand that the heating function of the fire is not affected. So he's very clearly saying that don't misunderstand. The smoke affects the illuminating function of the fire only. So that is what he's talking about. Okay. Now, what is the comparison here? Krishna says that desire can cause problems by blunting your reasoning power, your discriminative ability. It can blunt. And we are all aware with that. When we are angry, when we are very, very, obsessed with something, a very strong desire is there, you know that your mind has been affected. Your ability to think has been affected. We have all gone through this. A person who takes a decision when under the influence of a strong desire usually takes a wrong decision. A strong desire has to be kept aside. So whenever we have some very strong desire to do something, what we should do is park that desire. Wait till our intellect takes over and then analyze. Then only we can take a decision which is rational. Otherwise, irrational decisions are the result of desire-driven actions. And that is why in Kathopanishad, there is an imagery where the jiva is compared to a vehicle. It is a Ratha Kalpana. There is a vehicle. So there are 5 horses. The 5 horses are compared to the 5 sense organs. And the 5 roads are compared to the 5 sense objects. The reins are compared to the mind. And the buddhi is compared to the charioteer, the driver. And it is the buddhi alone which should decide what should be the way of life. It is the buddhi alone which, using the mind, which is the reins, controls the 5 horses, which are the sense organs. And that is why I should use my intellect to decide in this life, do I want to walk the path of jnanam, or do I want to walk the path of materialism? Life is full of choices. And that's why discrimination, vivekaha. And what does karma do? It blunts that viveka shakti. And therefore Krishna says in the second line, Tena idam avritam. That desire, that strong desire, it covers this viveka shakti. It is veiled. So that is the first one. And then he says, gives another example, Yatha adarshaha malenacha. The mirror is covered by dust. When the mirror is covered by dust, what happens to the natural function of the mirror? The mirror cannot do what it should be doing. What should it be doing? It should be showing my face. And it cannot do that. And therefore, the more I clean the mirror, the clearer my face is seen. Remember that nothing is happening to my face. Only the mirror is being cleaned. And this is often used as an example for the effect that Chitta Shuddhi has on Shravanam. Okay. So with this, I'll stop here. There is still a lot to be said over here, but the time is up. So we'll continue from here. We'll continue from the second example, Yatha Adarsha Malenacha. If you have any questions, you can ask. Otherwise, we can close the day.
Can I ask?
Yes, please.
Actually, it's regarding third simile. So if you're going to explain in next class.
Yeah, third simile will come in the next class.
Thank you.
Okay, so with this, we'll stop.
Om Acharya?
Yes, please, Vandana, go on.
Actually, it was about the 35th verse.
Okay.
Last bit we said about the gunas. The fine line here is we've seen that the guna composition can change.
Yes.
Like I've observed it personally too. Like I had a lot of rajas a few years back, and it's become vastly reduced.
Yeah.
So if we go by, what should be our Swadharma based on the guna composition,
yes,
it will change, no? So even
yes, it will change. Your Swadharma will change.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So Swadharma is always linked to your present guna composition, what it is today. If it has changed, obviously your Swadharma is also changing. But remember that this change of Swadharma happens for a dedicated spiritual seeker who is consciously trying to change the guna mix.
So how I'm treading this line, and like your advice is, while I'm pursuing activities which are as per my current guna composition,
yes,
I keep analyzing if it now feels natural or not. Am I making sure I'm not suppressing any desires?
Yeah, you see, like, let us say 4 years ago, you were highly Rajasic, you said, or rather, the Rajas was more dominant than the rest of the gunas, right? So you were involved in activity all the time. Now, over the last 3 years, that's because of constant practice that has come down. And therefore, what are you doing? You are sitting in Uttarakhand and you are doing sadhana. What was natural for you 4 years ago will not be possible anymore. What is natural to you today would have made you very uncomfortable 4 years ago. So yes, that is exactly what you are doing.
Thank you.
Okay, so with this we'll stop. Yes, John, tell me. Two questions, only one.
No, today just one. So, could you please repeat the 6 virtues of Bhagavan?
I will put it up on the group so that you can copy it down. All right. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnam Eva Vasishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Tat Sat. Om Namah Shivaya. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Acharya.